The sound of a leather boot lacing in the dark should not have woken him. But Nathan Wolfe had spent 12 months learning the particular rhythm of Sera Marak's morning routine, and this rhythm was wrong. Too early, too careful, too quiet in the way someone moved when they hoped not to be heard at all. He lay still in his bunk on the other side of the stone partition that divided the shepherd's cottage, listening to the whisper of fabric and the soft clink of her few possessions being gathered. His heart began to hammer against his ribs with a dread he could not name. The door opened with the barest creak. Cold air swept through the cottage, carrying the scent of frost and highland heather. Then it closed again, and she was gone. Nathan swung out of bed and crossed to the main room in 3 strides. The hook where Sera's worn coat usually hung stood empty. Her boots were gone from beside the hearth. On the scarred wooden table, a piece of paper sat folded once, his name written across it in her careful script. He did not stop to read it. He did not stop to pull on his own boots or grab a jacket against the pre-dawn cold. He simply ran. The frost-white pasture stretched before him in the thin moonlight, each blade of grass crystalline and brittle beneath his bare feet. The cold bit into his soles, but he barely felt it. Ahead, perhaps 200 yards distant, a dark figure moved steadily away from the cottage, away from the sheep pens, away from the only home Nathan had ever offered another human being. Or not quite human. The distinction had never mattered to him, though it seemed to matter to everyone else. Sera Marak walked with her head down and her pack slung over one broad shoulder, her breath pluming white in the freezing air. She was not running. That struck him as she grew closer under his pursuit. She was not fleeing in panic or haste. She walked with the steady, deliberate pace of someone who had made a decision and intended to see it through, no matter how much it cost her. Sera. His voice cracked across the silence. She stopped. For a long moment she stood utterly still, and he thought she might not turn around at all. Then her shoulders sagged just slightly, and she turned to face him. Even in the dim light he could see the green of her skin, darker across her cheekbones and the bridge of her nose where the sun had touched her during their long days in the high pastures. Her tusks, small and curved, gleamed faintly as she pressed her lips together. Her dark hair hung in a thick braid over one shoulder, and her eyes, amber and bright, reflected the moonlight with an almost metallic sheen. She was beautiful. He had thought so from the first day she arrived at his gate, gaunt and desperate, begging for work in exchange for food and a place to sleep. He thought so now, with frost gathering in her hair and sorrow written across every line of her face. "You should go back," she said. Her voice was low and steady, the same voice that could gentle a frightened ewe or call the dogs in from the far ridge. "You will freeze out here. So will you." He stopped a few feet away, his chest heaving. His feet were already numb. "What are you doing, leaving?" She shifted the pack on her shoulder. "I left you a note. You should read it." "I do not need to read it. I need you to come back." "No." The word was quiet but absolute. "No, Nathan, I cannot." "Why?" She flinched at the question as though he had struck her. Her jaw worked for a moment, and then she looked away across the frost-white fields toward the dark bulk of the ridge that separated his land from the valley beyond. "Because I am costing you everything. Because every week you lose another buyer. Because people talk, and what they say will ruin you if I stay." The words hit him like stones. He had known, of course, that some of his longtime buyers had stopped coming. He had known that when he took his wool to market, some of the other shepherds turned away or muttered behind their hands. He had not known that Sera had noticed. He had hoped foolishly that she had been too busy with the work, too focused on learning the rhythms of the station and the needs of the flock to see how some people looked at her, at them. "I do not care what they say," he said. "You should." Her voice was still steady, but he heard the tremor beneath it now, the hairline crack in her composure. "You have built something here. You have a good name, a good flock, a good life. I will not be the reason you lose it. You are not, I am." She turned back to him, and the moonlight caught the wetness on her cheeks. She was crying. Sera, who had birthed lambs in the freezing rain and hauled water from the well when the pump froze and mended fences until her hands bled, was crying. "I heard what Garrett Stone said last week. I heard all of it, that you had lost your mind, that you were harboring a monster, that he would never do business with a man who let an orc sleep under his roof." Her voice broke on the last word. "He was your best buyer, Nathan. He took half your wool every year. And he will never come back as long as I am here." Nathan felt something hard and cold settle in his chest. Garrett Stone. He should have known. The man had always been loud and coarse, quick to laugh and just as quick to judge. Nathan had done business with him for 5 years, and had never particularly liked him. But the man paid fair prices and paid on time. When he had come by 3 weeks ago and seen Sera working in the yard, his face had gone red and then white. He had left without making his usual offer, and Nathan had told himself it did not matter. There would be other buyers. He had not known Sera had heard the things Garrett said. "Garrett Stone is a fool," he said, "and a bigot. I do not want his money. You need his money. Winter is coming. You have expenses. You cannot afford to lose buyers because of me. I can afford anything I choose." He took a step closer. His feet were burning with cold now, a painful prickling that meant frostbite was not far off. He ignored it. "Sera, listen to me. I do not care what Garrett Stone thinks. I do not care what any of them think. You are not a monster. You are not a burden. You are—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. "I am what?" She was looking at him now, really looking, her amber eyes searching his face. "What am I, Nathan?" He wanted to say it. The truth sat on his tongue, 3 words that would change everything. But he had never been good with words. He was a shepherd, a man of long silences and longer solitudes, and the language of emotion was foreign territory. So instead he said, "You are the best worker I have ever had. You are strong and smart, and the sheep trust you. The dogs trust you. He swallowed hard. "I trust you." It was not enough. He could see it in the way her expression crumpled, in the way she turned her face away again. "Then trust me when I say this is the right thing to do. I will find work somewhere else, somewhere my face will not cost someone their livelihood. There is nowhere like that." The words came out harsher than he intended. "You know that. There is nowhere in this whole damned region where people will not look at you and see an orc first and a person second. At least here you are safe. At least here you are wanted," he thought, "needed, loved." But the words would not come. "At least here I am ruining you," she finished. "No, Nathan. I will not do it. I would rather scrub floors in some tavern kitchen or haul stone on a road crew than watch you lose everything because you were kind to me." She turned and started walking again. Panic flared in Nathan's chest, bright and hot. He could not let her go. The thought of the cottage without her, of the morning silence unbroken by her voice calling to the dogs, of the lambing season ahead with no one to share the sleepless nights and small triumphs, was unbearable. More than that, the thought of Sera out there alone, facing the world's cruelty without even the small shelter he could offer, made him want to howl. But he did not howl. Instead he said, "Wait, please, just wait." She stopped again but did not turn. "Come back to the cottage," he said, "just for a moment. There is something I need to show you. Nathan, please." The word hung in the frozen air between them. He never said please. He never begged. In 12 months of working side by side, he had given orders and made requests and occasionally offered thanks, but he had never pleaded. Sera turned slowly, Her face was a mask of misery. "It will not change anything." "Maybe not. But you owe me that much. One more moment." It was a low blow, and he knew it. Sera took her debts seriously, real or imagined. She had been trying to repay him for giving her work ever since she arrived, as though fair wages and a dry bed were some extraordinary kindness, rather than the bare minimum any employer owed. But he was desperate, and desperation made people cruel. She walked back toward him without a word. They crossed the frost-white pasture together, not speaking, the silence broken only by the crunch of frozen grass and Sera's measured breathing. Nathan's feet had gone from burning to numb to a distant ache that he knew would become agony once he was indoors and the blood flowed back into them. He did not care. Inside the cottage, he lit a lamp with shaking hands while Sera stood by the door, her pack still on her shoulder, clearly ready to bolt the moment he had shown her whatever it was he wanted her to see. He crossed to the corner where he kept his tools and supplies, knelt, and pulled out a long, wrapped bundle from beneath his workbench. He had worked on it all winter, in the late evenings after Sera had gone to bed, carving by lamplight with the patient focus that was the closest thing he had to a talent. He had told himself he was making it because they would need it come spring, when the flock grew and they had to split the grazing. He had told himself it was practical, sensible. He had been lying. He unwrapped the bundle and held up the shepherd's crook. It was not as fine as the one his father had made for him 20 years ago, but it was solid and well-balanced, the wood smooth and oiled, the curve of the hook deep enough to catch a sheep's leg without hurting it. Carved into the shaft, just below the grip, were two symbols. One was his own mark, the stylized mountain peak that he burned into his fence posts and gates. The other was newer, less confident but unmistakable, a crescent moon with a single star, Sera's mark. The one she had drawn in the frost on the window one night when he asked her if she had any family symbols, any crest or sign she wanted to use. She stared at the crook. Her mouth opened, then closed, her eyes, already wet, filled with fresh tears. "I made it for you," Nathan said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, rough and uncertain. "For the spring grazing, I thought," he stopped, then made himself continue. "I thought we would run the flock together, not as master and worker, as partners. Nathan." It was barely a whisper. "You are not a burden, Sera. You are not a monster. You are—" He stopped again, and this time the words simply would not come. So instead he held out the crook, offering it to her like a man might offer a ring. She took it with trembling hands. Her fingers traced the carved marks, his and hers, side by side on the smooth wood. "You made this for me," she said. "Yes. You want me to stay. Yes. Even though it costs you buyers, even though people talk. I do not give a damn about any of that." The frustration broke through, sharpening his voice. "Sera, I have lived alone on this station for 8 years. 8 years of silence and isolation and talking to the dogs because there was no one else. And then you came, and everything changed. The work was easier because you were there to share it. The days were shorter because I had someone to talk to. The cottage was warmer because I was not the only person in it. You think I care what Garrett Stone says. You think I care if every buyer in the valley turns away. I would burn the whole flock before I would let you walk away thinking you were not wanted here." She was crying openly now, tears streaming down her green cheeks, her shoulders shaking. "I fell in love with you," she said. "I did not mean to, I tried not to. But every day I worked beside you, every night I sat across from you at dinner, I fell a little more. And it terrified me, because I knew what it would cost you. People already hated that you employed an orc. If they knew you cared for one, if they even suspected," she shook her head helplessly. "I could not do that to you. I could not be the reason your life fell apart." Nathan set the crook aside very carefully, because his hands were shaking too badly to hold it. Then he crossed the space between them and took Sera's face in his hands, tilting her head up so he could look into her amber eyes. "You are not the reason for anything bad in my life," he said. "You are the only good thing that has happened to me in longer than I can remember, and if you think I am going to let you walk away, you are out of your mind." But he kissed her. It was clumsy and graceless, and his frozen lips were probably unpleasantly cold, but he kissed her anyway, because words had failed him and this was all he had left. For a moment she stood frozen, shocked into stillness. Then she dropped her pack and kissed him back, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck, her tusks pressing gently against his face. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathless. Sera's eyes were wide and wondering. "You love me," she said. "Yes. You should have said something." "I am not good with words." A laugh broke from her, half sob, half genuine amusement. "No, no, you are not." She touched his face, her calloused fingers gentle against his cold skin. "Your feet must be frozen, completely numb. You are an idiot." "Yes." She kissed him again, softer this time, and then pulled him toward the fire. They sat together on the hearth while she peeled off his wet socks and rubbed warmth back into his feet, scolding him the entire time for running outside barefoot like a madman. He let her scold. He would have let her do just about anything as long as she stayed. When the feeling had returned to his feet, a painful tingling that made him grit his teeth, she sat back and looked at him seriously. "Garrett Stone will not be the last," she said. "There will be others. People who refuse to do business with you because of me. People who say terrible things. People who might do worse than talk. I know. And you are willing to face that, for you?" "Yes." She shook her head slowly, wonder and disbelief warring on her face. "I do not deserve you." "You have it backward." He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. Her hand was bigger than his, broader and stronger, the nails thicker and the knuckles more pronounced. He had always liked her hands. They were capable hands, honest hands. "I am the one who does not deserve you. But I am selfish enough not to care." They sat together in the growing dawn light, and slowly the cottage warmed around them. Outside, the dogs began to bark, signaling the morning and the work that waited. There were sheep to tend and water to haul and a dozen small tasks that would fill the day. But for a few minutes more they stayed where they were, hands clasped, the shepherd's crook with both their marks leaning against the wall beside them. The days that followed were strange and sweet and terrifying all at once. Nothing about the work changed. They still rose before dawn to tend the flock, still spent long hours in the high pastures, still shared the evening chores and the simple meals that followed. But everything else was different. Nathan reached for Sera's hand as they walked. Sera leaned against him while they sat by the fire in the evenings. They kissed in the doorway and murmured to each other in the dark, and learned the shape of each other's bodies, with the hesitant tenderness of people who had never expected to be allowed this kind of happiness. The fear was there too. Sera still tensed whenever someone approached the station. Nathan caught her watching the road sometimes, her expression troubled, as though she expected an angry mob to appear at any moment. He understood. The world they lived in was not kind to those who crossed its unspoken boundaries, and they had not just crossed a boundary but obliterated it. 3 weeks after the morning Sera tried to leave, Garrett Stone returned. Nathan was in the yard mending a section of fence when he saw the familiar wagon rolling up the track. His stomach clenched. Sera was in the cottage, and he prayed she would stay there, but he knew better. She had the instincts of a creature that had been hunted, and she would have heard the wagon the moment it turned off the main road. Garrett pulled his horses to a stop and climbed down, his broad face ruddy with exertion or anger or both. He was a big man, thick through the chest and shoulders, with a belly that spoke of prosperity and a voice that carried across fields. "Wolfe," he called, "we need to talk." Nathan set down his tools and walked over, keeping his expression neutral. "Garrett, I came to make you an offer on your wool. Same terms as last year. I will take half your spring shearing at 8 crowns per stone." It was a fair price. More than fair, actually, given that Nathan had expected never to hear from the man again. He should have been relieved. Instead, he felt a cold prickle of suspicion. That is generous. It is business. Garrett's eyes flicked toward the cottage, then back to Nathan. "I expect you have come to your senses since I was last here. I expect you sent that creature on its way." There it was. The condition. Nathan felt his jaw tighten. "Her name is Sera. She is still here. She is staying." Garrett's face darkened. "Then you are a fool. I came here willing to overlook your lapse in judgment, willing to do business as we always have, and you throw it back in my face for the sake of an orc." "For the sake of the woman I love, yes." The words were out before Nathan could think better of them, and the moment they landed he knew there would be no taking them back. Garrett's expression went from angry to apoplectic. "You are insane. She has twisted your mind somehow, put some kind of spell on you. There is no spell. I love her. She loves me. And I do not need your money badly enough to pretend otherwise. You will regret this, Wolfe. When the whole valley knows what you are, when no one will touch your wool or sell you supplies or give you the time of day, you will regret it. You are choosing to destroy yourself for a monster." Nathan took a step forward. He was not a violent man, but he felt violence simmering just beneath his skin now, hot and dangerous. "Get off my land. You, get off my land, or I will throw you off." For a moment Garrett looked like he might argue. Then he seemed to register the look on Nathan's face and thought better of it. He spat in the dirt, climbed back onto his wagon, and whipped his horses into a turn. The wagon rattled back down the track, and Nathan stood watching until it disappeared. When he turned back to the cottage, Sera was standing in the doorway. Her face was pale, her expression stricken. "You sent him away?" "Yes. He offered you 8 crowns per stone." "I do not care. Nathan, that is more than you will get anywhere else. That is what you need to make it through the year. I will find another buyer." "What if you cannot?" He crossed to her and took her hands. They were cold, trembling slightly. "Then I will sell directly at the market, or I will take less money from someone else. Or I will make do with whatever I can get. It does not matter." "It does matter." Her voice cracked. "That is your livelihood, your future. You cannot just I can and I did." He squeezed her hands gently. "Sera, listen to me. I told you before, I do not care what it costs. I am not giving you up for money or reputation or anything else. We will find a way." She searched his face, and whatever she saw there seemed to break something open inside her. She pulled him close, burying her face against his shoulder, and he held her while she cried. Not the quiet, restrained tears she had shed before, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. He held on and let her cry, and when she finally quieted, he kissed her forehead and led her back inside. That night, they lay together in the narrow bed that had been his alone for so many years, and he told her about his childhood on a different sheep station, about the parents he had lost to fever, about the slow, lonely years of building his own flock and his own life. She told him about her clan, about the war that had scattered them, about the years of wandering and scraping by, and being turned away from every door until she found his. They talked until the candle burned down and the room was dark, and then they held each other in the silence and tried not to think about what the future might hold. The weeks before shearing were busy. The flock was healthy and the lambs were thriving, which meant there would be good wool to sell if Nathan could find a buyer. He made inquiries at the market and sent messages to contacts in neighboring valleys, but word had already spread. Garrett Stone had made sure of it. Everywhere Nathan turned, he met closed doors and curt refusals. Some people were apologetic. Others were openly hostile. A few muttered about unnatural arrangements and moral corruption. By the time shearing season arrived, Nathan had not secured a single buyer for his wool. Sera grew quieter as the days passed. She worked as hard as ever, but the lightness that had entered her eyes after the morning she tried to leave was fading, replaced by a haunted, guilty look. Nathan knew what she was thinking. She was thinking that she had ruined him, that her presence had cost him everything, just as she had feared. He tried to reassure her, but words were still difficult for him, and his reassurances sounded hollow even to his own ears. On the first day of shearing, they set up the pens and the shearing platform in the yard and began the long, exhausting work of cutting the winter wool from the flock. It was hot, dusty work, and by midday they were both drenched in sweat. Sera handled the sheep with her usual calm efficiency, holding each animal steady while Nathan worked the shears. They had developed a rhythm over the months, a silent coordination that made the work faster and easier. It was one of the things he loved about working with her. She anticipated what he needed before he asked. They were halfway through the flock when a wagon appeared on the road. Nathan straightened, shears in hand, and shaded his eyes against the sun. The wagon was unfamiliar, painted blue with white trim, pulled by a matched pair of gray horses. The driver was a woman, which was unusual enough in itself. And as the wagon drew closer, Nathan saw that she was young, perhaps 30, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and a sharp, assessing gaze. She pulled the wagon to a stop at the edge of the yard and climbed down. Nathan Wolfe. Yes, my name is Clara Whitley. I am a wool buyer out of the western valleys. I heard you might have fleece to sell. Nathan blinked. He had sent inquiries west, but he had not expected a response, certainly not a personal visit. I do. But I should tell you, most buyers are not interested in doing business with me this year. So I heard. Clara walked over to the pile of freshly shorn fleece and picked up a handful, rubbing it between her fingers. I also heard you run a clean flock and produce quality wool. Is that true? I like to think so. And I heard you employ an orc woman. Is that true as well? Nathan's jaw tightened. Here it was, the moment when she would make her excuses and leave. Yes, her name is Sera, and she is an excellent shepherd. Clara glanced over to where Sera stood holding a ewe, her green skin dark with sweat, her expression wary. Does she know the work? Better than anyone I have ever employed. Good. I need someone who knows what they are doing. Clara turned back to Nathan. I am expanding my business and I need reliable suppliers. I do not care if you employ orcs, elves, or talking dogs, as long as the wool is good and the weight is honest. Can you deliver on those terms? Nathan stared at her. Yes. Then let us talk price. They spent the next hour negotiating, and by the time Clara climbed back onto her wagon, Nathan had sold his entire spring shearing at a price that was not quite as high as Garrett's offer, but more than enough to keep the station running. Clara promised to return in the fall to discuss a long-term contract, and as her wagon rolled away, Nathan stood in the yard feeling like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Sera walked over to him slowly. Did that just happen? I think so. She did not care. About me, I mean. She cared about the wool. Sera let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. I thought we were finished. I thought you had lost everything. I told you we would find a way. She turned to him, and her eyes were bright with tears again, but this time they were not tears of sorrow. You did. You did, and I did not believe you, and I am sorry. There is nothing to be sorry for. There is everything to be sorry for. I doubted you. I tried to leave. He kissed her, cutting off the flow of words. When he pulled back, he said, You stayed. That is all that matters. They finished the shearing over the next 2 days, and when the last sheep had been released back into the pasture, Nathan and Sera loaded the wool into sacks and stacked them in the barn to await Clara's return. It was hard, satisfying work, and when it was done, they collapsed together on the porch steps and watched the sun set over the ridge. "What happens now?" Sera asked. "Now we wait for Clara to come back, and we prepare for the fall, and we keep going. Just like that, just like that." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "It seems too simple. Most things are once you stop fighting them." They sat in silence for a while, and then Sera said, "I want to marry you." Nathan turned to look at her. "What?" "I want to marry you if you will have me." His heart kicked hard against his ribs. "Sera, I know it will not be easy. I know people will talk, and some will do worse than talk, but I do not care. I love you, and I want to spend my life with you, and I want the world to know it." She took his hand. "So I am asking, will you marry me?" He should have said yes immediately. He should have pulled her into his arms and told her that nothing would make him happier. But the old fear rose up, the fear that he was not good enough, not eloquent enough, not enough of anything to deserve her. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Once we do this, there is no going back. You will be bound to me and to this life, to the isolation and the prejudice and all of it." "I am already bound to you," she said. "The only question is whether you want to be bound to me." "Yes," the word came out hoarse. "Yes, I want that. I want you. I want all of it." She smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Then we will do it. We will marry, and we will build a life together, and we will be happy." "Yes," he said again, and kissed her. They were married a month later, in a small ceremony on the ridge overlooking the station. There was no priest, because no priest in the valley would perform the rites for a human and an orc. Instead, they spoke their vows to each other in front of the dogs and the sheep and the endless sky, and Nathan slipped a ring of braided silver onto Sera's finger. It was not much, but it was all he had, and when she looked at it, her eyes shone. That night, they lay together as husband and wife, and Nathan traced the green skin of her shoulder with his fingertips and marveled at the path that had brought them here. A year ago, he had been alone, expecting to remain so for the rest of his life. Now he had a partner, a wife, a future that looked brighter than anything he had dared to imagine. Clara returned in the fall, as promised, and made good on her offer of a long-term contract. She brought other buyers with her, people from the western valleys who had heard about Nathan's flock and were willing to overlook his unconventional household in exchange for quality wool. Slowly, the station began to prosper. Not in the way it might have if Nathan had been willing to compromise, to hide Sera away, or pretend she was something other than what she was. But it prospered in a way that felt honest and sustainable, built on relationships with people who valued the work more than the workers' bloodlines. There were still hard moments. A merchant in the village refused to sell them supplies and had to be bypassed in favor of a longer trip to a more distant market. A group of young men threw stones at Sera one day when she went to fetch the mail, and Nathan had to drag her away before she could respond with the violence they probably deserved. There were whispers and stares and the occasional outright confrontation, but there were also unexpected kindnesses. A neighboring farmer brought them a basket of apples and asked no questions. A traveling tinker mended their pots for free and told them he admired their courage. Slowly, carefully, they built a life that was theirs. 2 years after their wedding, Sera gave birth to a daughter. The labor was long and difficult, and Nathan spent the hours pacing the cottage like a caged animal while the midwife, a gruff older woman who had delivered half the babies in the valley and did not care who the parents were as long as they paid, worked with Sera in the bedroom. When the baby finally came, her first cry was the most beautiful sound Nathan had ever heard, The midwife brought her out, a squirming bundle wrapped in soft wool, and placed her in Nathan's arms. "Healthy girl," she said. "Strong lungs. She will be a fighter." Nathan looked down at his daughter. She had Sera's green skin, a shade lighter, and his own dark hair. Her eyes, when they opened, were a striking pale green, neither his brown nor Sera's amber, but something entirely new. She had tiny tusks, barely visible bumps on her lower jaw, and when she yawned he could see the pink interior of her mouth. She was perfect. Sera, exhausted and pale, held out her arms, and Nathan placed the baby in them. "She is beautiful," Sera whispered. "She is," Nathan agreed. They named her Lily, after the wildflowers that grew on the ridge in the spring. It was a simple name, a human name, and Nathan knew some people would say they should have chosen something orcish, something that honored Sera's heritage. But Sera had chosen it, and when Nathan asked her why, she said, "Because she is both of us, human and orc, and she deserves a name that belongs to both worlds, even if both worlds do not want her." Lily grew quickly, as half-orc children did. By her first birthday, she was walking and babbling in a mixture of words and sounds that delighted Nathan and made Sera laugh. By her second birthday, she was running through the pastures with the dogs, her green skin tanned darker by the sun, her laughter ringing out across the fields. She had Nathan's quiet thoughtfulness and Sera's fierce determination, and she loved the sheep with a passion that suggested she would be a shepherd when she grew. Life settled into a new rhythm. Nathan and Sera worked the station together, and Lily grew up surrounded by wool and dogs and the wide highland sky. There were still difficulties. When Lily was 3, they tried to enroll her in the village school, and the teacher refused to accept her. Sera wanted to fight, but Nathan talked her into teaching Lily at home instead. It was not fair, but it was safer, and safety mattered when your daughter had green skin and tusks in a world that feared and hated such things. When Lily was 4, a second daughter arrived. They named her Rose, another flower name, and she had more of Nathan's features than Lily did. Her skin was a pale olive rather than green, and her tusks were almost invisible. She could, Nathan realized with a pang, pass for human if she wanted to. He did not know whether to be relieved or saddened by that. The girls grew up together, as different as they were similar. Lily was bold and adventurous, always climbing trees and chasing the dogs and coming home with scraped knees and tangled hair. Rose was quieter, more cautious, but with a stubborn streak that showed itself when she dug in her heels and refused to be moved. They fought and played and loved each other fiercely, and Nathan watched them with a gratitude so profound it sometimes brought tears to his eyes. Sera was a wonderful mother. She was patient and firm and endlessly creative, turning chores into games and teaching the girls songs from her childhood in a language Nathan did not speak but loved to hear. She told them stories about the orc clans, about the proud history and the terrible wars and the hope that someday things would be different. She taught them to be strong, to be proud, to never apologize for who they were. Nathan taught them other things. He taught them the rhythms of the flock and the signs of weather. He taught them how to mend fences and sharpen tools and read the land. He taught them, mostly by example, that love was a choice you made every day in 1,000 small ways, and that the choice was always worth it. When Lily was 6 and Rose was 2, Clara arrived with a proposal. She had expanded her business significantly and now supplied wool to manufacturers in 3 different regions. She wanted to open a permanent trading post in the valley and needed a partner to help manage it. Someone who understood the local shepherds and could negotiate fairly. Someone she trusted. "I want you," she said to Nathan over tea in the cottage while the girls played in the yard. "You and Sera both. You would run the trading post together, buy wool from the local shepherds, manage the sales. I would provide the capital and the contacts. We would split the profits. Nathan glanced at Sera, who was listening intently. That is a generous offer. It is a good business opportunity for all of us. Clara set down her teacup. I will be honest with you, there will be resistance. People will not like the idea of an orc woman running a trading post. But I think we can overcome that. Your reputation has grown. People know you run a good station. They know you are fair and honest. And I think there are enough people who care more about money than prejudice to make this work. What do you think? Nathan asked Sera. Sera looked out the window at the pastures, at the sheep grazing on the hillside, at the ridge where they had married. I think it is a risk. It is, Clara agreed. But it is also an opportunity, a chance to build something bigger than one station. A chance to prove that people can work together, no matter what they look like. Sera was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I think we should do it. The trading post opened the following spring, a sturdy wooden building on the main road with a painted sign that read Wolfe and Marak Wool Trading. The name alone was a statement, and Nathan knew it. By putting Sera's name on the sign alongside his, he was telling the world that she was not his employee or his assistant, but his equal partner. Some people would hate it, but some people hated them already, and Nathan was tired of living his life in fear of what others might think. The first few months were difficult. Several shepherds refused to sell to them, and there were incidents. Someone threw a rock through the window one night. Someone else left a dead rat on the doorstep. But there were also shepherds who appreciated fair prices and honest dealing, and slowly the business began to grow. Clara's contacts in the western valleys provided a steady stream of buyers, and by the end of the first year the trading post was turning a modest profit. Sera thrived in the work. She had a head for numbers, and a talent for negotiation that surprised Nathan, though it probably should not have. She was smart and capable, and she had spent years watching people underestimate her. Now she used that to her advantage, letting them assume she would be easy to manipulate, and then outmaneuvering them with a skill that left them baffled and grudgingly respectful. Nathan handled the relationships with the local shepherds, leveraging the reputation he had built over years of quiet, honest work. He was not a salesman or a charmer, but he was trustworthy, and in a business where trust mattered, that counted for a lot. The girls adapted to the change with the resilience of children. Lily loved the trading post, loved the bustle of people coming and going, loved helping her mother count coins and weigh fleece. Rose was less interested in the business, but enjoyed the new house that came with it. A larger building with room for all of them, and a garden where she could plant flowers. Years passed. The trading post grew. Lily turned 10, then 12, then 14, growing tall and strong with her mother's build and her father's quiet determination. Rose turned 8, then 10, still quieter than her sister, but with a sharp wit and a talent for drawing that she used to design labels and advertisements for the trading post. They were good girls, Nathan thought, smart and kind and resilient. They had faced prejudice and cruelty, but they had also known love and stability, and he thought, hoped, that the balance would tip in favor of the latter. On a crisp autumn evening when Lily was 16 and Rose was 12, Nathan and Sera sat on the porch of their house and watched the sun set over the valley. The trading post had closed for the day, and the girls were inside preparing dinner. The smell of roasting meat and fresh bread drifted out through the open windows, and from somewhere in the distance came the bleating of sheep. "You ever regret it?" Sera asked. Nathan looked at her, surprised. "Regret what? All of this? The difficulties? The prejudice?" The fact that we had to fight for every small piece of ground we gained. He thought about it. Thought about the sleepless nights and the fear and the moments when he had wondered if they were making a terrible mistake. Thought about Garrett Stone and the thrown rocks and the merchant who had refused to sell them supplies. Thought about all the ways the world had tried to make them give up. Then he thought about Sera beside him, her hand in his. He thought about Lily's laughter and Rose's quiet smiles. He thought about the trading post with both their names on the sign, and the flock still grazing on the hillside, and the life they had built together out of nothing but stubbornness and love. "No," he said. "Not for a second." Sera leaned her head on his shoulder. "Good, neither do I." They sat together in the gathering dark, and Nathan felt a peace he had not known was possible settle over him. The world was still hard. There were still people who hated them, still battles to fight, still days when the weight of it all felt crushing. But there were also days like this, quiet and perfect, when he could sit with his wife and listen to his daughters laughing inside and know that they had made something good. Something that mattered. Lily came to the door. "Dinner is ready. We are coming," Sera said. They stood, and Nathan took Sera's hand as they walked inside together. The table was set, the food was hot, and the girls were already seated and arguing cheerfully about something Nathan did not quite catch. He took his place at the head of the table. Sera sat beside him, and they all joined hands for the brief moment of silence that had become their family tradition. Then they ate and talked and laughed, and Nathan looked around the table at the faces of the people he loved most in the world and felt a gratitude so deep, it was almost painful. This was what he had run across the frost-white pasture for all those years ago. Not just Sera, though she was the heart of it, but this. The family. The life. The stubborn, hard-won happiness that no one could take away. After dinner, the girls cleared the table and Nathan and Sera walked back out onto the porch. The stars were coming out, bright and clear in the cold autumn air. Sera wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stood close to Nathan, and he put his arm around her. "I am glad I ran after you," he said. She looked up at him, her amber eyes reflecting the starlight. "I am glad you did too." They stood together in the quiet night, and Nathan thought about the shepherd's crook he had carved all those years ago, the one with both their marks. It was still in the cottage at the old station, carefully preserved, a reminder of the moment everything had changed. Someday, he thought, he would pass it on to Lily or Rose. Someday they would understand what it meant, that two people from different worlds had loved each other enough to build a bridge between them. But for now, it was enough to stand here with Sera and watch the stars and know that they had made it. Against all odds, against all expectations, they had made it. Inside, Lily began to play the small harp Nathan had bought her for her birthday, and the soft music drifted out into the night. Rose joined in with her clear, sweet voice, singing a ballad about lovers separated by war. It was a sad song, but somehow it did not feel sad. It felt like a celebration, a reminder that love could survive even the hardest trials. Nathan tightened his arm around Sera, and she leaned into him, and they listened to their daughter's music and let the night settle around them like a blessing. The years continued to unfold. The trading post became a fixture of the valley, known for fair dealing and quality goods. Lily grew into a formidable young woman, eventually taking over much of the day-to-day management. She had inherited her mother's business sense and her father's integrity, and she ran the operation with a confidence that made Nathan proud. Rose, quieter but no less determined, became the public face of the business, charming customers with her art and her gentle manner in a way that disarmed even the most skeptical. There were still hard times. A drought one year nearly ruined them. A rival trading post opened in a neighboring valley and tried to undercut their prices. There were always whispers, always people who looked at Sera and saw a monster rather than a woman. But the hard times became less frequent, and the good times more common, and slowly the balance shifted. When Nathan was 52 and Sera was 48, they returned to the old sheep station. Clara had offered to buy them out completely, to take over the trading post and let them retire in comfort. They had accepted, not because they were tired of the work, but because they wanted to go home. The station had been rented out for years, but Nathan bought out the lease and they moved back into the cottage where they had first fallen in love. It was smaller than they remembered, and shabbier, but it was theirs. They spent the winter repairing and renovating, and by spring it felt like home again. Lily had married by then, a young man from the western valleys who worked as a wagon driver for one of Clara's suppliers. He was kind and steady, and he treated Lily with the respect she deserved, and that was all Nathan had ever wanted for her. They lived in the town near the trading post and visited often, bringing their own children, a boy and a girl who had Nathan's dark hair and eyes that shifted between green and brown depending on the light. Rose had not married, though she had suitors. She said she was not interested in tying herself to anyone just yet, that she wanted to see the world first, to paint and draw and discover who she was outside of the valley. Nathan understood. Sera worried, but Nathan told her to let Rose find her own path. She was smart and capable, and she would be fine. They settled into a new rhythm at the station, quieter and slower than before. They kept a small flock, just enough to stay busy, and spent their days tending the sheep and the garden and each other. Nathan's hair had gone gray, and his joints ached on cold mornings, but he was content. Sera had aged too, her green skin marked with lines around her eyes and mouth, her tusks slightly yellowed, but she was still beautiful to him. Still the woman he had run after across the frost-white pasture all those years ago, one spring morning, nearly 30 years after that desperate chase. Nathan woke to find Sera already up and outside. He pulled on his boots and went looking for her, and found her standing on the ridge where they had married. She was holding the old shepherd's crook, the one he had carved with both their marks, and she was looking out over the valley. He walked up beside her. "What are you doing out here?" "Remembering," she said, "thinking about how far we have come. We have come a long way, we have." She turned to him and her eyes were bright. "Do you know what today is?" He frowned, running through the calendar in his head. "The 1st of spring, it is the anniversary. 30 years ago today I tried to leave, and you ran after me." He had not realized, had not been keeping track, but now that she said it, he could see it was true. 30 years, a lifetime. "Best decision I ever made," he said, "running after me or letting me stay. Both." She laughed, the sound warm and rich, and handed him the crook. "I found this in the storage shed. I thought we should bring it out, put it somewhere we can see it." He took the crook and ran his fingers over the carved marks. They were worn smooth now, the edges softened by time, but they were still visible. His mountain peak and her crescent moon, side by side. "We could hang it over the mantel." "I was thinking the same thing." They walked back to the cottage together, and Nathan hung the crook over the fireplace where it would be the first thing they saw every morning. It looked right there, he thought. A symbol of everything they had built, everything they had survived. That evening they sat on the porch and watched the sunset, as they had so many times before. The valley was green with new growth, and the sheep were scattered across the hillside, white dots against the grass. The air smelled of earth and flowers and the faint smoke from the chimney. "I love you," Sera said suddenly. Nathan looked at her. "I love you too, I know, but I wanted to say it anyway." He took her hand and kissed her knuckles. "I am glad you did." They sat in comfortable silence as the light faded and the stars began to appear. Nathan thought about the path that had brought them here, all the choices and chances and moments of stubborn courage. He thought about the people who had helped them and the people who had tried to stop them. He thought about Lily and Rose and the grandchildren and the legacy they would leave behind. But mostly he thought about Sera. About the morning she had tried to leave quietly, and the way his heart had nearly stopped when he realized she was gone. About the desperate run across the frost-white pasture, and the crook he had carved and the moment she had taken his face in her hands and kissed him. About all the days and nights since then, the laughter and tears and ordinary moments that had woven together into a life. "Thank you," he said. She looked at him puzzled. "For what? For staying? For giving me a chance? For building this life with me?" Her eyes grew bright with tears, but she was smiling. "You are welcome. Though I think I should be thanking you, you were the one who ran after me. You were the one who refused to let me go. We saved each other," he said. "That is how it works." She leaned her head on his shoulder and they watched the stars come out, and Nathan felt a contentment so complete it was almost like joy. This was enough. This moment, this woman, this life. It was more than enough. It was everything. The night grew cold, and eventually they went inside and stoked the fire and made tea. They sat together by the hearth, beneath the shepherd's crook with both their marks, and talked about small things. The sheep. The weather. Lily's latest letter. Rose's plans to travel to the coast. The ordinary, precious minutiae of a shared life. When the fire burned low, they went to bed and lay together in the darkness, hands clasped. Nathan listened to Sera's breathing slow and even out as she fell asleep, and he thought about how close he had come to losing this. If he had not woken that morning, if he had hesitated or stopped to read her note or let fear hold him back, if he had not run across the frost-white pasture, barefoot and desperate, chasing the only woman he had ever loved. But he had run, and she had stayed. And together, they had built something that no amount of prejudice or hardship could destroy. He closed his eyes and let sleep take him, and his last thought before darkness claimed him was a simple one, profound in its simplicity. They had made it. Against all odds they had made it, and that was enough.